In Chatelet, my dudes, and welcome to the Polecat Cast. This is number 108, When Male Privilege Goes Wrong, where our stealthy polecats ferret out the best feels, funnies, and what the fucks to discuss Slam Bam Badger style. Buckle up, buckaroos, try to secure your sides, and mind your spines. Also, maybe don't eat anything beforehand, and make sure the bleach is locked up tight. So you got this far. You want a medal? Today's Polecat panel consists of Max Darrett, Simpsons kin, and definitely does not live in a pineapple under the sea, Polecat Punster and Pussycat Punisher Hannah, Dr. Randomercam, Panda Puppeteer and Verbal Sniper, and me, your host, the Doge in Charge. In addition, the big half of Big and Robot, Scott, the silverback self-aware simian, is currently indisposed, but will be with us very shortly. Today we will be discussing the following topics. All of those years of dealing with toxic League of Legends players could finally pay off, as the U of U, not a pun, will be offering college scholarships for students who perform adequate ponage. You have likely seen the memes, but we at Honey Badger Radio still have to comment on one David Dow and his experience flying the friendly skies, or else. Father decides to take his daughter to Disney World, causing her to skip her classes, but the UK nanny state no likey, so he is being fined for his good deeds. Next in a series of fucked up shit happening to men via the state and corporations, a South Dakota man was forced by police to give up his pee via force, and methods that I really don't want to go into here, but we will, unfortunately, later. Also, Title IX is being used as a weapon against U of T student via questionable means, and it leads to his suicide. Real cheery show this week, folks. Real cheery. And finally, our bonus story for the patron-only after show. To cap it all off, apparently we still, despite everything else, live in a society that just hates women, just hates them. Want proof? Vice President and big fan of the electric company, Mike Pence, apparently perpetuates rape culture because he says that he chooses not to dine with women without his wife present. The monster! Anyway, if you would like to participate in our after shows, either as an audience member or a participant, please consider becoming a patron at www.patreon.com/honeybadgerradio. Now, before I hand this off to Max to give us the first story, wait, actually, no, I'm doing the first story. So before I hand it off to myself, this show and future shows hereafter will be done a little bit differently. Giggity. Those of you joining us live will be able to watch the show as usual, welcome, but because of recent YouTube advertising fuckery, we will be unlisting the show right at the end and sending that link to minds.com. We need to grow that platform and other competitive platforms in order to fight against this YouTube shenanigans going on, as things seem to be getting more and more difficult while working with YouTube. If you can, please make a Minds account and follow us at Honey Badger Radio. All one word. We will be doing things this way for the foreseeable future and would appreciate your support until we can find a better solution. Okay, now that that's out of the way, allow me to get into the first story. Anyone who's ever experienced the thrill... Wait, actually, hold on a second. Maybe this is one for Max. I gotta think about this. No, this is mine. Alright, sorry. Anyone who's ever experienced the thrill of competitive gaming has at one point or another wondered if they could turn their hobby into a career. This year, the University of Utah is offering students just that by giving out partial competitive esport scholarships for the popular multiplayer online battle arena game League of Legends. The University of Utah isn't the first to try such a scholarship. South Korean universities, such as the prestigious Chungang University, have recognized esport athletes to be on the same level as traditional athletes for over a year now. With Utah's status as one of the 5 richest athletic conferences in college sports, it seems that the US is gearing up to take the world of esports more seriously now. In the long run, Utah hopes to expand the program through sponsorship, deals, and marketing. Eventually, they'd like to extend full scholarships to as many as 35 esport athletes. All right, well, go ahead, Max.
Yeah, this is sort of bizarre. I suppose it makes sense because it is a type of skill, and esports is a growth industry. It's certainly at a place now where it's bigger than it's probably ever have been. You see people filling up theaters and cheering on people playing games. So that it's understandable that that's something that you might want to try and invest in as the world of gaming grows bigger. However, it's kind of weird how they're going to offer a scholarship for this sort of thing, because in contrast with something else that's competitive, obviously like sports, how can you train competitive gamers like you would train an athlete, right? Because with athletes, you'd have exercise regiments, diet regiments, but with gaming, I don't know exactly how you can break down sort of a schedule, a routine to try and improve your skill. It's something that is sort of unique to people, and there's different play styles, many more than some basic things that you would do in hockey or basketball or something like that. So I'm not really entirely sure how they're going to make that sort of thing work. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's a little odd. I mean, I'm all for, like, for example, colleges have things like chess clubs and stuff too. Other sort of, activities that aren't just in the arena of sports. Can you get a scholarship for being a really good chess player?
Can you?
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, I would like. I guess I'd like compare it to that to see if it's viable. Because my first thought was, how viable is this? Even as a gamer myself, I would find it a bit strange that they would be giving away essentially money because people play video games. And I mean, I know there are people who earn it, but Hannah, go ahead.
As far as the question of scholarships, I know universities that become known for particular things do give scholarships for people participating in those things. It's not just sports, but they're not already known for this, so they're probably trying to build something. And I think sometimes if the university is trying to build something, they will do the same thing that a business does, and that is make it attractive to the people that they want to get into it. And so, of course, they're gonna spend money trying to attract people who will dedicate themselves to this at least on some level. But isn't it a course of study, not just a club?
Let me go to the link. Hold on a second here.
I briefly looked at this before, and I thought,
Yeah, I think it is. It isn't just that. Okay. University of Utah will become the first big-time sports school to offer scholarships for competitive video gaming. So far, the most high-profile entry into collegiate esports. Backed by the Salt Lake City School Video Game Development Program, Utah's first varsity esports team will play Riot Games' popular League of Legends and compete in Riot's Collegiate League. More teams in other
okay,
games
so
will
it
be
is a
announced
club.
this year. So yeah.
Yeah, it is just a club. Okay, well, that's good. I when I first read about it, I thought they're paying people to learn how to do this, and I thought, well, that's kind of weird, because there isn't. I mean, there's a job market for it to a degree, in the same way that there's a job market for being a rock star, but nobody would be stupid enough to believe that if they went to, well, yeah, there would be people that would be stupid enough to believe that if they went to rock star school, they would come out and be a rock star. But it wouldn't work. I mean, it'd be lying to somebody to tell them that that was what was going to happen. So it would be, I would have to, if this was a course of study, I would call it a scam. But if it's going to be just a club, it's probably that somebody at the university has an interest in it and wants to see it grow, or wants to see the university get involved in it. It might even be something that students initiated. Or it could simply be a gimmick the university is using to expand its student base, get more students coming to that university. So, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why they might do this. It is odd, but there are still reasonable possibilities as to why they might do it.
Right.
Yeah.
My
Okay.
one thing on it that I'm thinking of is the one joke I made on it, I think on Twitter, was seeing this attacked by feminists using Title IX in 3, 2, 1. Because it's going to happen. They're going to be like, oh, these guys are all misogynists and girls can't participate. And the girls that are already participating aren't real girls because they're not like us. They aren't special snowflakes that get upset at everything the guys say. We want you to change everything about it or end it. And I'm just waiting for that to happen. That's my prediction. That's what's going to happen to this.
Yeah, it's going to go from being something like competitive Call of Duty or competitive League of Legends to competitive Tetris, and I'm not going to be having any of that, and I'm sure they aren't either.
Right?
No offense.
Now, Tetris actually is educational,
It
but
is.
yeah, it helps you develop your spatial relationship perception.
Well, there you go.
And so if you're going to work in a job where you have to fit a lot of stuff into a small space, you should play Tetris to practice.
Yeah, it was an unbelievable help for my sex life. But anyways, what were you saying, Joanne?
That's how I learned how to stuff the stuff I used to get when I worked at the gas station. I used to work at a gas station that sold food, and we were supposed to have 4 freezers, and we only had 3, but they sent us 4 freezers worth of food, and I couldn't fit it all in. But I played Tetris a lot, and eventually I got to where, I could fit it all in.
Oh.
While you were on the
you
job, were you just humming to yourself?
Yes, yes, I was. I got that damn song stuck in my head, but it worked.
Well, I personally think that using long shapes to try to fit them into other gaps that are open is perpetuating rape culture, and that's why I don't play Tetris. It's just rapey as fuck.
You're making fun of my culture, man. Racist or something.
Shape culture.
Shape culture.
This game came from Russia, and we don't like the Russians, so that way,
They're probably the ones that started rape culture when they invented that game in the West. You see, the hackers. They've always been there.
No Russian here. We like to take it slow and easy.
Okay, so, Max, let's go on to the next story.
All right, so this is some shit, and I'm sure you guys have all heard about this, right? The United Airlines story. They're currently facing a media storm as, a customer was violently removed from a flight from Chicago to Louisville, Kentucky. Customers were first asked to voluntarily give up their seats to make room on the full flight for 4 crew members who were needed at the plane's final destination. The airline...
Hello? Hold on. Something happened. Can you guys hear me? Shoot. Why did this happen?
For the event, the CEO apologized for having to reaccommodate.
There it goes.
For having to reaccommodate customers. Though United referred to its contract of carriage in this situation, which says it can deny boarding to passengers if a flight is overbooked, and no passengers volunteered to give up their seat, many are questioning why United didn't offer a bigger incentive before resorting to forced removal. According to the Chicago Sun-Times, the Chicago aviation police officer involved in the incident has been put on leave. This is just... God.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, because it's the cops' fault that this all happened. Oh, my God. Well, I didn't hear that part before.
Yeah, an important distinction is that it was police. People were saying it was TSA or something else. Some people were, but it was police. And I didn't know that this was in Chicago. I didn't know that, but now that I know that, it doesn't surprise me. So... pretty messed up.
And here's the thing that really struck me about this, and this was reported on the Hills blog. This was not accommodating passengers, that were just passengers. This was for employees. They were removing paying passengers to accommodate employees of the airline who were traveling. And I looked for any information to say that this was to accommodate flight crew, because the flight crew has to be seated during the flight, but it wasn't. I turned to watching television news last night, which was, that always sucks because you always see shit on television news. But Fox actually had one of the passengers come on and talk about the experience. And he said that the passengers spent the flight berating the flight crew, or the employees that were being accommodated, that how dare they kick this guy off so they could have their flight. And that's basically what happened. There was this guy got kicked off of an air flight that he paid for so that United's employees could be accommodated. And the cops reacting to it, by the time the cops got there was an actual conflict, and it's not necessarily, his reaction wasn't necessarily an overreaction under the circumstances, but neither was theirs. They're cops that walked onto an airplane to remove a passenger who was flailing around and by that time unruly. And they did their job. And I don't fault the cops in this. I fault the airline.
Absolutely. I was gonna say I'll if I can help it, I won't be flying United, if at all possible.
Yeah, that's I was going to advocate for them after the leggings incident, because the outrage over the leggings incident was bullshit. You had an employee who used a company benefit, so their family was accommodated by the airline at a lower rate than they would have paid if they'd have just gone out and bought a flight. And because they fly as guests of the employee, they represent the airline. They got a dress code, and one of the family members brought kids, failing to follow the dress code. And at first, the information that first came out made it look like the parents were mad and tweeted about it, but it was actually some idiot feminist that saw the incident take place and made a big deal about it. And that everybody got all outraged over a girl having to change clothes to follow a dress policy for employees. But it takes something like this for people to get outraged on behalf of a guy. And I mean, if you think about it, we've had stories in the men's movement. We've had stories for years of men being forced to change seats on airplanes at the beginning of the flight when they're not supposed to make you change a seat. Because they always tell you you're not allowed to trade seats with somebody until the plane is in the air, and then you have to return to your seat before it lands, your original seat before it lands. And they always say that it's because if there's an accident, if there's a crash or something, that it's so that you can be identified for medical purposes. If you're injured, and that they know that they're treating the person with the medical history, that they can find out, and things like that. Your family knows who was injured and who wasn't, but they'll force men to move because of the misconception that men are dangerous to children. And only people in the men's movement have had the awareness to be outraged at that, because They don't do that to women. In fact, they'll move adult women that are strangers to children next to those children to avoid having a man sit next to them. But until they pulled a doctor who has other people depending on him off of the plane, nobody cared. And until they beat the hell out of the guy doing it, nobody cared. Mm-hmm. And that's, this isn't per se a men's issue, because the airlines do this to everybody. But the fact that it took something like this for people to get outraged over the treatment of a man on an airline, that is a men's issue. And the fact that people are wanting to blame the cops now for something that was really the airline's fault is a men's issue too, because I'll bet not one of those cops was a girl.
I think the thing that disgusts me the most about this, obviously there's a lot of different elements, but I just got notified of this about 30 minutes ago. And I'm not exactly sure if every specific about this is true, so fact check me on this, but from what I understand, there have been stories that have been picked up on, or maybe they were leaked, that go into the past of Dr. David Dow and try to justify what happened to him by putting out news about stuff that he's done in his past. Like, for example, what I'm reading here off of TMZ, forgive me, is that he offered prescription drugs to somebody if it meant that he could have sex with them. Now, if that's true, that's reprehensible in a different way. But in this particular case, it's absolutely irrelevant. What happened to this guy is not okay.
Mm-hmm.
It could have been handled in a much more professional way. And United, from this moment, ever since it happened, they've been handling it in the absolutely worst possible way.
Well, it looks like there's some information, and it's not coming from a news source. It's coming from forums, but they've got two doctors mixed up here that have the same first and last name, but the middle names are not the same. And let's see if I can find the link that this person has. Yeah, the doctor that is accused of having a ugly past is from Kentucky. The doctor that was removed from the plane is from New Orleans. He's from Louisiana. So it's not the same. It's not the same, and he has a different middle name. Not the same guy. So it looks like, yeah.
Somebody's
so it
going to
looks
be called
like,
a racist.
well, somebody dug up information, and somebody dug up information on this guy to smear him. But he, like you said, even if everything about that was true, well, and it couldn't possibly be, because if his medical license, if he did something where his medical license was yanked for, something that like that, I don't think he'd get it back.
Not at all.
So he wouldn't have patients waiting at home. So I even if it was true, it would still be. They didn't have that information when they pulled him from the flight. It wasn't why they pulled him from the flight.
Right.
So
TMZ, why did I ever trust anything that you put out?
Well, the thing about TMZ,
fake news.
They're iffy,
Fake.
but they're not all bad. They're the only outlet that had the full Ray Rice video that showed, his girlfriend's behavior, and showed that she came at him, and not just that second, but the fact that she had been, aggressive from the beginning. Like, you could see at the beginning of that video that she was doing the angry woman side to side head shake, and she walked past him when he was standing next to one of the pillars in the hotel and chucked him under the chin with her. So they were obviously fighting before that. Nobody else played that video. And after discussion started, TMZ eventually took it down too. But they're the only ones that had it in the first place that right. Showed that there was.
Hello? Oh, the audio went down again. Hold on. I gotta disconnect and reconnect.
Quite a bit. But I think what they were trying to do was be the first to get more of the story. And it's the lack of verification is really bad. And that's something that they need to shape up on.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure that it was targeted. Now, if United's been, there are people saying United's the one that's releasing that information. I haven't seen anything that shows the information came from United. Mm-hmm. But if they did, that's the worst PR move they could possibly make.
For the people who don't know what this story is, I have the video that was going around. So I want to show that video off of the man, what happened to the man on the flight. So if you guys who are in the call with me in the show, go to my SciTube link that I gave you earlier. Are you guys in there?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna play this. Careful, guys. For those of you who don't know, this is what happened on the flight.
Disturbing situation. A man was dragged off a United Airlines plane by authorities after the flight was overbooked at Chicago's O'Hare International Airport on April 9th. In a video posted by passengers on social media, the man screams while being dragged by his arms through the aisle by security. In the videos, passengers can be seen in disbelief and protesting the security guard's actions.
Busted his lip.
Oh my God! Look at what you did to him!
Audra Bridges, who posted the video to Facebook, told the Courier-Journal the flight to Louisville was overbooked by 4 people. Passengers were randomly selected to give up their seats to United employees. Bridges said the man was very upset, refusing to leave his seat, reportedly telling United he was a doctor who needed to see patients. United CEO issued an apology, stating they are conducting a detailed review of what happened and are reaching out to this passenger to talk directly to him. Bridges reportedly said the man returned, bloody and disoriented, to the plane after the incident.
Jesus Christ.
Male entitlement in action, am I right?
Yeah.
If we're going to bring identity politics into it, like The Guardian did, by the way.
This is male privilege, right?
Wait.
Oh, God. Were they really?
Not to take the identity politics angle that The Guardian did, but if we're doing that, then what? You know, I imagine the feminists are going, "Oh, this is an outrage."
Wait, Doctor, are you seriously
just say, "Yeah, male entitlement"?
Are you serious? The Guardian actually tried to advocate on behalf of United?
Yeah, they said it's a problem being Asian on airlines now.
Oh, for
I know.
sake.
Well done, Guardian.
Really? That Guardian sucks.
Well,
jeez.
Yeah. Well, if it's any consolation, you know, something that we can take solace in, according to another thing that I'm reading here, United stock has dropped $1.2 billion since this happened.
Yeah.
I think this is turning out to be more damaging than United breaks guitars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which was pretty damaging. That actually hit them pretty hard, too. People have an affinity for musical instruments. You know, there is something else, though, that I would point out about this. Like, this is something... Now, this is not saying that United was okay in what they did. When you buy an airline ticket and you buy, like, the lowest price airline ticket and not the first class ticket or anything like that, you don't pay for special seating, you don't buy early, you buy at the last minute and everything, you're gambling. It does say in your agreement, your purchase agreement, that you're buying a ticket that can get bumped. And that's something that very few businesses are allowed to do. Like, you don't go to the grocery store and hand the cashier $3 for a 99.5% chance at getting a gallon of milk. You go pay for a gallon of milk and you take home a gallon of milk. And if you give them the money and they say, well, we're going to keep your money, but you don't get any milk, you know, you can call your attorney general and say, hey, they took my money and they didn't give me any product, and they were advertising the product for this price. In fact, if the milk is sour, you can get them on that. If they advertise it at $3 and then they charge you $3.50, you can get them on that. But not an airline, not a hotel, you know, not I think other travel companies and other accommodation companies like that, they have that same thing. They can overbook, and then they can tell you, well, yeah, you paid for this, but you're not getting it. And they're not even, if I understand correctly from what I've read, they're not even 100% required to refund or accommodate you and keep your money and not do anything for you. And they generally don't do it that way. They generally take care of, if you get bumped, they put you on another flight, they pay for your expense staying at the airline, you know, or at the airport, at a hotel, things like that. But if they're going to start abusing the privilege of being able to do that in order to keep their prices down, then the legality of that privilege and the details of the legality of that privilege might need to be re-examined. Mm-hmm. If they cannot regulate themselves, which they should be able to, businesses should be able to regulate themselves, and they should get the benefit of the doubt until they start pulling shit like this. And this happened once, and it hit the airline pretty hard, and hopefully the market will regulate them by demonstrating to them that people won't shop with an airline that does shit like this. But if it doesn't work that way, you know, if people continue to just fly this airline and that's it, and they don't change anything, or other airlines start doing the same thing, then then maybe there needs to be some regulation as to the specifics of what happens when they do this. And maybe they shouldn't be allowed to bump doctors. Maybe there are certain professions, like if I got bumped, it wouldn't be that big of a deal for the people around me. It would be a big inconvenience to me, and maybe one of my coworkers might have to come into work on a night when they weren't supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
But if I was a surgeon and I was flying someplace to do a life-saving surgery and I got bumped, that person might be inconvenienced to death.
Yep.
So airlines really ought to consider before they do stuff like this. Companies really ought to consider before they do stuff like this that if they're going to abuse a freedom that they have to the degree that they are doing harm to other people, and that this had the potential to be that, then maybe they're going to lose it.
Mm-hmm.
You know the reason this story even got out in the first place? It's because so many people filmed the action on their phone. If there was none of that footage, then it, because every story has had this video in it, and it's the visceral reaction to that video that made this take off. So can anyone guess what rule they're going to make? What regulation they're going to bring in next?
Yeah.
Please turn off all your devices before you even get on the plane, please. Now a federal offense.
Yep.
To take
That's
any
gonna-
footage inside a plane.
I can see that.
And if that happens, that's going to be one that people need to stand up against and start writing to your legislators about, because it's bullshit. It's reasonable to say that you can't be online. It's reasonable to say that you can't be sending a signal. You can't have put your phone on airplane mode or whatever when they're trying to communicate back and forth with the tower. It's not reasonable to say your electronic device can't be in use. That would be very transparently deliberate, a deliberate attempt to avoid transparency. But this is one reason why I would advocate a federal law that made it legal in all 50 states of the U.S. to record if you're in public, and that if you're involved in a conversation and the other person records it, that person has the right as long as they're involved in the conversation.
Yeah.
Like we've got states now that if you call somebody and they record the phone call, you can actually file charges against them, or the state will file charges against them. If somebody calls you in that state and you record the phone call, you can get in legal trouble for it. That's wrong. If somebody calls you, you should be able to record the call. If somebody comes to your house and talks to you, you should be able to record the call, or record the conversation. And that's just this type of thing is why.
Absolutely.
You do have the right to prove yourself right or prove yourself wrong. Basically, prove the facts of what happened, and when somebody's story might not be the same, or when somebody might have a reason why they don't want people to know what happened.
Rule number 1 in life, according to the Honey Badger Brigade: record everything.
Always be Well, think about it. The Calgary Expo situation. What would have happened there if we hadn't had Sage's recording? We'd have been fucked. Everything they said about us, that would have been the only official story. There would have been no way to contradict it. It would have been in just our word against theirs.
Yep.
And in the U.S., there are states where the law says that's the way it has to be. Now, I live in a state that's different than that. If a telemarketer calls me, I can record the call. If a collection agency calls me, I can record the call. If the government calls me, I can record the call. It's one of the reasons I have the recording that I made when I had the conversation with the researchers from the CDC that had done the National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey. I was calling from Ohio, which is a state where only one party involved in the conversation has to know that it's being recorded, to Georgia, where it only one party has to know, and so I was able to record the call. And technically, just the fact that I was in Ohio was all I really needed. So, but if I'd have been in a state where it was illegal for me to record, and I had recorded it, I'd have been in trouble. Or if I'd have been in a state where it was illegal for me to record and I'd obeyed the law, I would have had nothing to report. So it's very important. It's very valuable for a citizen to be able to record. It's valuable to the citizens and the police for citizens to be able to record the police, because not only can we be there when they're doing something wrong, but there have been times when citizen recordings of the police have demonstrated that they didn't do anything wrong. And so recording is very important.
Yeah. Very, very well said, Hannah. And it is really fortunate for us that we happen to have Sage, and he had thought to do that. So, and it's only because of his experiences at his university. All right, so we're gonna move on to the next story, and I will do this one. So, John Platt, a UK father, has been fined. What for? For taking his 6-year-old daughter out of school without permission to visit Disney World in Florida. Interestingly enough, it wasn't that Mr. Platt didn't ask for permission. Rather, when he did, the school simply refused it. As one might guess from the context of this article, Mr. Platt disregarded this and took her anyway. Because it's his fucking daughter. Apparently, though, due to the history of school attendance laws that date back to the 1870s, school boards are empowered to require attendance by children ages 5 through 12, which was the reason the UK Supreme Court ruled to uphold the fine. At the same time, the ruling overturned 2 lower courts' decisions that had already been in favor of Mr. Platt, who had argued that the government's case represented a vast overreach of the nanny state. When asked about the outcome, he replied, quote, "You are not the final arbiter of what's right for your child," end quote. Overall, the case has drawn heavy debate across Britain since it calls into question the rights of parents to raise their children as they see fit, as pitted against stiff truancy laws in a nation where school attendance is not just mandatory, but compulsory.
Get the fuck out of here. Are you serious? It went through 2 lower courts?
Yes.
Just because they're so determined to get this guy fucked over? Are you serious? Jesus Christ. School for a 6-year-old at that age, if they're going to be missing a week just so they can go to the happiest place on the planet, you got to be out of your goddamn mind. You honestly think that there's that much relevance to the job that you're doing? Go fuck yourself, man. Let them go play with Mickey and Minnie Mouse for a week. Like, God, like, it's really not, they're not going to miss, an entire week of school. The fact that they're not there to learn what 3 + 2 is, they're not going to be able to learn it when they come back in about a week. Just shut the Sometimes I really hate my country of origin. I'm actually from Britain, by the way.
Are you?
Oh. There's a couple aspects to this, and I come from an education family. Like, a lot of my family members are school teachers, and I've got family members that have been school administrators and so on. And I've taught, but not in I've taught in the post-secondary education system. It's not the same. But as far as actually, I came up against something like this, worse in a way, when I was teaching too. But that's a different story. There's different aspects to this, and I understand both sides of this because of how I grew up and everything. Yeah, it's bullshit for the school to make a big deal about this. It's absolutely bullshit for them to make this big of a deal about this. And the idea that the parent is not the arbiter of what's good for their kid is also bullshit. It's not abuse to take your kid to Disneyland by any stretch of the imagination. And it doesn't detract from a child's education to miss a week of school in kindergarten for what might be a once-in-a-lifetime experience, considering that they're traveling to another country to experience it. I mean, unless there's a Disneyland in Europe that they went to.
No, they went to the one in Florida.
They went to Florida, so they're traveling to another. So this is,
yeah.
And there's a good deal of this.
You have to travel on an airline though, so it's quite injuring.
Yeah, it's quite injuring. At least they didn't get dragged off, by the police.
I wonder if he
obviously they didn't travel United.
But I wonder if he got to sit next to his daughter on the flight.
Yeah, I know.
He didn't go on British Airways.
And the thing that really is irksome about this from my perspective is that I see it as another instance of educators treating experiences outside the institution of education as if they cannot be educational. When I was a kid, and attendance was mandatory when I was a kid too. Every day that I missed school, I had to have a doctor's note. And I missed a lot of school for medical reasons. I was in the hospital a lot. I was at home sick a lot. I almost died regularly. Like, that was just a yearly event. Well, it's that time of year when Hannah almost dies, So, secretly, I'm Kenny from South Park. But in any case, back then, it was required. It was mandatory that you go to school every school day. And you had to have a damn good reason if you were going to miss. But when my mom got the opportunity to take my brother and me to see Ronald Reagan speak in Lima, and yes, we mispronounce everything in Ohio. We have a Versailles, we have a Lima. It gets worse. But my teacher didn't say, well, you can't go because it's a school day. My teacher said, write a couple of paragraphs describing what you saw so you can share it with the class. And if I were teaching kindergarten and I had a kindergartner going to Disneyland, I would ask the parent to help the child make a collage of pictures so that the child could come back and tell the class about the trip. This is what it's like to be in an airport. This is what you have to do to be on an airplane. This is what it's like to be at Disneyland. These are the neatest things that I saw at the park. These were things that are not fun.
This is what a churro is, and this is why you should eat 10 of them a day.
Yeah. And
before I forget, how do you think Ohio is supposed to be pronounced?
Well, it depends on which part of the state you're from. Like, I'm originally from the northern part of the state, so it's Ohio. But everybody around here where I live now pronounces it Ohio. So I'm from Ohio, but I live in Ohio.
It's supposed to be Ohio.
Yeah.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. No, it's not. It's it's Japanese for hello.
You got me. Ohio.
Repeat
after me, Hannah. Versailles.
Yeah. No, Versailles. But it's still we pronounce all kinds of. We have Bell Fountain is another community. You can travel the world in Ohio. You can go to London. You can go to Sydney. You can go to Cairo. But the point of this basically is the school had avenues where they could have allowed this to happen and turned it into a positive educational experience for the child and the rest of the class. And they missed it. They fucked up. And the parent, I'm sure that students in the UK get breaks, right? They get holiday breaks and stuff like that.
When I was 12, they let me take a month off school to go to Australia. It was the only holiday we ever had, and I had pretty good attendance, so they let me go. And the proviso they gave me was, why don't you, keep a diary of stuff and like write down things you learn about Australia, or to do with what you'd be learning in school and shit. And it wasn't even mandatory; it was just encouraged. They didn't even check my work or shit, but it was fun just writing about shit.
Oh, I got to come back.
If they do that when you're 16 or 18 and you're in the middle of your exams, then yes, that's a bloody stupid thing to do. But the younger you are and the less important the classes are, was it 6? She's fucking 6 years old.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that before.
I mean, it's the school did screw up there, but when you're taking a vacation, don't you usually schedule it during holiday breaks and stuff like that? Unless it's there should be a reason why if you don't.
Well, I think I don't know the story, but it seems like the father spontaneously said, "You know what? We're going to go to Disney World or Disneyland, whatever the one in Florida is. I think it's World. I don't know."
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so he kind of created this problem himself. And I mean, that's not necessarily a gender thing. Men and women both do this.
No, this is not a gender thing at all. But I think that this is the reason why I chose it as a story is Even though this is the law, apparently, I
It's
think
an
that
authoritarian thing.
we're looking at a problem with the nanny state, right? Which is something
Right.
that he brings up too, and I think that you know, I believe that education is important. I won't be able to speak to the quality of publicly funded education in the UK, but in the States, public education is in dire need of an overhaul, and it's not that great. This is why there's a lot of people, especially people who live in low income areas like mine, that are pining for charter schools. They want better options. They want to be able to choose the school that their kid goes to. And we put lots and lots and lots of money into public education. And the fact that it is essentially a government entity that is tax funded, that's not really good for kids. When I look at a story like this, I think of it in the context of our public education system. And if there was something like this where people would get fined because their 6-year-old wants to, or they want to take their 6-year-old on a vacation to the happiest place on earth, or whatever you're calling it, that means that the parent is prepared to make that small sacrifice. And the fact that he will be fined for it is basically another way of saying you're not allowed to do that, not without penalties, right?
They were jelly
But it
because
is
they were going to
still
Disney World.
it is still a parent's responsibility. And I mean, the school was wrong. The parent could have handled it better. Mm-hmm. If I were going to take my family someplace like that, if there was something like people are bringing up finances and stuff in the chat, it's a different price at different times of year and everything. If that was the case, I would have been in communication with the school way ahead of time, and I would have been working on exactly what I talked about, demonstrating to the school that it was an educational experience, that there was something that the child would get out of it that made it worth missing school, talking about getting schoolwork ahead of time, anything that the teacher thought the child couldn't do without. Now, obviously, a kindergartner, it's not that big of a deal. You're not missing a lot, but there are things a parent can do to mitigate a situation like this. And if this story happened in spite of those things would be getting reported too. The parent did all of these things and the school wouldn't budge. Now, I'm wondering if part of the reason that happened was that something exists in the UK school system that's similar to what happens here in the United States. And that is, our federal government pays our public schools based on attendance. So if your butt is not in that seat, if there is a week, there's 1 week in the year where they test that. If there is a week that the school is going to not budge on, no, you can't miss school this week, it's that week. And they only look basically during that week unless a student has a poor attendance rate where they're missing school like all the time. Mm-hmm. And they know, the schools know, that their funding can get cut because a student missed school during the wrong week, or because a student missed too much school during the school year. And when I was growing up, I had teachers threaten to flunk me in their classes because I missed too much school during the school year. Even though I did the makeup work, and even though it was mostly women, there are 3 of my male high school teachers bent over backwards to help me pass their classes when I missed 6 weeks because I had to go to the hospital and have surgery. So there's a difference there too. And it may be that somebody had an authoritarian attitude like my gym teacher did. She didn't think it was right that I should miss gym class just because I had pneumonia. So this is the kind of thing that you look at the individuals involved, and a lot of times you find out that they have that authoritarian attitude. But at the same time, with a parent that isn't prepared to deal with that, and isn't prepared to try to arrange their fun time with their family so that their child isn't missing school, that's a problem too. Mm-hmm. And it can cost the school money, and it can teach the child the wrong things. You get a job, you have to go to work, and you have to ask your employer for time off if you want to go on vacation. And if your employer says no and you go anyway, you can get fired. And it sucks, but that's a lesson that you learn.
I just want to throw in real quick. Someone in the comments section, Ren Genick says the amount of people who get fines every day from schools, it's all the time, and the school has to just be completely by the book. You have to legally be in education until you're 16. Your parents will be fined for it. And I think he's trying to tell us that this is the way it is, and we should know this. But I think that what we're doing is we're questioning the way it is. Maybe that's the problem. I mean, that's what I think, anyway.
Well, yeah, because I mean, what's the point of having a school? Do we have schools
to benefit the teachers? Just real quick, if I'm misrepresenting your argument, then let us know.
Like, do we have? Is that the reason the schools are there, to benefit the state, the teachers, and the administrators? Because if that's it, then we're really not doing anything worthwhile. Mm-hmm. But if they're there to benefit the kids, then the bottom line on whether or not a parent should be able to do something with their child, that takes away from what school is there for, it should be determined by what benefit the child is going to get from that thing. And that benefit shouldn't necessarily be limited to reading, writing, and arithmetic. Because there is a lot of stuff that you benefit when you go on a vacation. There's a lot of benefits that you don't. There's some of them are kind of immeasurable, but one of them is the fact that you sort of renew yourself. And again, having a unique experience is taking the chance to have a unique experience away from a kid. I wish I could remember the sci-fi writer that wrote this. There was a story that I read in junior high, actually in my dad's class, about a group of kids in a classroom on Mars, it was Venus, a classroom on Venus, and it had rained for forever because Venus is a rainy planet, and they had one day where for a couple of hours it wasn't going to rain. So these children had been stuck inside, all day, and every day, and they were going to get one opportunity to go outside and play in the sun. Mm-hmm. And the students thought it would be a funny trick to put one of their classmates in the closet and make her think they weren't going to let her out. And they forgot about her, and she didn't get to go out, and she didn't get to go out in the sun when the rest of them did. And then they all had to come back into the classroom when they realized they had forgotten to let her out of the closet. There they were. They had to face her when they let her out of the closet. And we all had this conversation about the story and everything. And the point of it was that there are some experiences when you take them away from a person, there's nothing you can do to make it right. And this is one of those things. It's not like they wanted to take a week out to go play on the beach in the next city. They wanted to take a week off to have a once in a lifetime experience, go to another country, and go to an iconic amusement park that is related to an iconic entertainment and media company. And the school was going to say no, and it might be the only opportunity they ever got to do that. It's an opportunity not everybody gets. And it's not right to take that away from a kid just because rules.
Right.
It's fucking Disney World, man. It's just so criminal to do that.
It's busybodies. And by the way, this is an old law from 1870, and there is debate. Yep. There is a debate ongoing about whether or not this needs to be updated and changed.
Atrix Wolf says it's Ray Bradbury, and it would be Bradbury. Bradbury, I think, is also the one that wrote, It's All in a Summer Day. The Spencer Fencer pointed, It's All in a Summer Day. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Bradbury also wrote The Sound of Thunder, so I should have remembered that.
Okay.
Just one quick thing, I guess, before we move on. I just want to recommend that if you ever take a kid to Disney World and you want them to treat it as an educational experience, please don't report back to your teachers that you found out that it's actually a small world after all.
Also, stay away from any of the feminist spaces. You don't want to learn any of that shit in Disney. Okay, Max, let's go on to the next story. I think it's your turn. So this is South Dakota.
Yeah. Okay, so I've never heard of this series, but apparently there's a series called A Brave New World. the series. And in this week's episode, a South Dakotan man is the most recent victim of yet another forcibly catheterized to provide a urine sample fiasco perpetrated by Pierre Police Department's finest. The description that Dirk Sparks gave about his ordeal reads like something out of a horror novel. Quote, "A mesh bag blurred his vision. He lay hooded and handcuffed as 4 police officers pinned him to a hospital exam table. Through the patterned light, he saw a 5th officer filming the procedure. His pants were loosened and pulled below his waist. Then pain. A nurse at Avera St. Mary's Hospital in Pierre had inserted a pencil-sized tube into his urethra to drain his bladder. Oh, God. Moments later, an officer with the Pierre Police Department held a cup of his urine that soon would be sent off for drug testing. This was all in response to a domestic dispute at Sparks' home several hours earlier, when officers who arrived on the scene observed him acting fidgety and asked for a urine sample. When Sparks refused to provide one, the police sought a warrant from a Hughes County country judge to obtain a urine sample from Sparks by, quote, medically accepted means. Evidently, it is medically acceptable it's medically acceptable to shove a pencil-sized tube into a man's penis for the purpose of extracting his urine on a hunch it might contain proof of drug use. And what's more, that the warrant was granted to do it. Oh, and by the way, in case you don't already feel bad for Sparks, a 3-year-old boy had a similar procedure done to him as part of a child welfare investigation involving drugs earlier this year. Try to wrap your head around that one. Are you kidding me? Isn't that supposed to be... Yeah, go ahead, Hannah.
We think your child might have been drugged, so we're going to molest him. From his perspective, we're going to molest him, and that will help protect him from any harm. Molesting your child is the only way that we can protect him from any harm. Yeah, you know what? Fuck that.
It's like that scene in South Park where Butters is in that massive machine and they're going, "Don't worry, we'll find out what traumatized your son."
Yeah, Jesus. This is really nuts. This is right along the line of cops treating refusal to be searched as just cause for searching without a warrant. They get this warrant from this judge based on what? The guy fidgeted? People fidget.
Yeah.
Especially when they're nervous. Having the cops called to your house because you're being accused of something makes you nervous.
It was a domestic dispute.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so he was already upset before they showed up. And he fidgeted, he might be on drugs. Yeah, that's not manufactured or anything. And it's this thing that I have a problem with in terms of the drug war. There's numerous problems with it, huge problems with it. But this is one of the ones that blows my mind that hasn't set more people off. So we have these conversations in the United States about bodily autonomy. And the conversations seem to usually revolve around women's rights, the right to choose whether or not to have an abortion, the right to rewrite your sexual history with someone to suit your current mood and say that you were violated if you changed your mind about what you did with them, and things like that. And yet, if you're accused of putting something into your body that other people disapprove of you putting into your body, the cops can go in after it without your consent. And people don't see that as a violation of your right to bodily autonomy. Like, what the hell kind of convoluted logic leads us to that kind of contradiction?
Mm-hmm. And plus, from what I understand, one of the most painful things that a human being can go through, particularly for men, is to have kidney stones, to try and pass that sort of thing. But to try and shove a tube up a man's urethra, and to do that to a 3-year-old boy, that's...
Catheterization itself like in a real, genuine medical setting where it's medically necessary because the urine cannot escape the bladder,
Sure.
because that's one thing. That and it's uncomfortable. I mean, I've been catheterized before. It's very uncomfortable. And there's a definite, I don't know, I'm kind of skewed when it comes to pain, because if it's not major pain, it doesn't really register. But it is very, very discombobulating. But I can imagine for a situation where you are restrained and upset and it's forced, that would be painful.
I want to read a little bit out of the USA Today article that this comes from about this, what the emotional and physical tolls were after this happened. Okay. Um, the pain that Sparks felt when going to the bathroom lasted for weeks, he said, and the emotional toll proved even more lasting. He still has nightmares about the incident. His fear of the Pierre police prompted him to move 50 miles east to Highmore. I didn't actually think they were going to go through with it, he said. Even when he went to the hospital, I thought it was just a threat. The Pierre Police Department would not answer questions. State court officials said that they have no way of tracking how often catheters are even used on suspects after Argus Leader Media reported on the practice last summer. So this goes back at least a little ways. Multiple people have contacted the news organization to say the police have threatened or have put them through the practice. Oh, this is actually kind of reminiscent. I'm showing people what a catheter looks like. I'm putting it on the screen. This is actually kind of reminiscent in a way, because we're talking about putting a tube that they say is at the width of a pencil into a person's urethra. In this case, a man, although these things have been done to women too. And it reminds me of the times where a woman, I think there was a woman who would use a Q-tip and put it inside of a man's urethra so that she could keep him erect so that she could rape him.
There's some other aspects of catheterization that make it dramatically different for a man than for a woman. A woman's urethra is the same length it's gonna be all the time, and it doesn't crumple up under any circumstances. It just is how it is. So you don't have to do anything to a woman to be able to fit a catheter into her urethra. You don't have to change anything. When you're using a catheter, because there's different types of catheters. There's a type of catheter that gets used if somebody's having to experience long-term catheterization because they have no bladder control or something. There's a condom catheter that can be used as well, but the internal catheter, it's very difficult to get that into a flaccid penis.
Oh, God.
So chances are this man was also forced erect before they put the catheter in.
How did they do it to the kid? I don't even know.
Oh, the 3-year-old, yeah.
Or the reason that he was in pain for so long was because they put it in a flaccid penis.
And then he became erect.
And they scratched him.
Oh, yeah.
Right up the length of the inside of his urethra.
Yeah, yeah.
So he went through what a man goes through after being tested for gonorrhea when they scrape cells off of the inside of your urethra. Be careful who you sleep with, by the way. And then they tell you don't pee for several hours afterwards because you want that to start to close up. Your body sort of starts to seal that up a little bit. But I imagine he probably had pain and urination for weeks if that happened. Mm-hmm. So either they injured him by doing it the hard way, by doing it while he was soft, or they did it the other hard way, which to me is extremely violating of his rights right there.
Absolutely.
It's bad enough if a guy has no choice but to get catheterized for health reasons, because you can't just leave urine in your body if it can't get out. It'll become toxic. And that's a rotten experience for a guy to have to deal with.
Yeah.
But for him to be forced into that situation, that's just absolutely disgusting. And I don't care what they're looking for. I don't care if they were looking for him transporting drugs in his urine that were going to be filtered out for other people to use. I don't care. That's wrong, and it should be illegal.
And to Mike's point, imagine the 3-year-old boy that had also had this done to him. I don't think he's ever going to be the same.
That's why I called it molestation.
Mm-hmm.
Because once again, either they had to hurt him, or they had to jack him off enough to get him hard so that they could fit that in there without scratching him up.
Okay, I'm ready to move on.
And that's just wrong.
No.
I'm ready.
I'm done with it.
I'm ready to move on to the next story.
It's reprehensible.
It is. That was that me? No, that was you. That was you, Max. Okay, it's my turn.
Yeah.
All right, this is the last one. No, this isn't. There's one more after this. Okay, so Title IX. Thomas Clock, a straight male student, committed suicide after a Title IX kangaroo court. The University of Texas ignored its own policies to punish Clock for sexual assault, and now his father is suing the university for violating his son's Title IX rights. The accusing student's story is that Clock had opened his laptop to type "gays should die." The accuser claims that he responded on his own laptop, "I'm gay," and that Clock then said under his breath that he was a faggot. The accuser said he should leave the class, and Clock allegedly responded, "You should consider killing yourself." Notice a lot of this stuff is all hearsay and alleged stuff, right? No real evidence for sure. Clock denied this accusation, and administrators who investigated acknowledged that there was no evidence that supports the accuser's claims. Clock said the accuser made unwelcome sexual advances on him. Clock rejected those advances and told the accuser that he was straight by typing the message in his search browser. After further advances, Clock said that he was the one to ask the accuser to leave. The lawsuit suggests that perhaps the rejection led the accuser to make up a story, possibly from his own fear of being accused of sexual misconduct. Despite learning that Clock may have been the victim of sexual harassment, no investigation was conducted, and Clock was not told he should file a report. The accuser reached out to Associate Vice President of Student Affairs, Heather Snow, with whom he had a friendly relationship. Snow became the accuser's advocate, helping draft a complaint and conducting a disciplinary procedure without following the school's Title IX policies. UTA's Title IX coordinator was not informed, even though Snow suggested it constituted sexual harassment, and the Title IX coordinator should have been responsible for overseeing the investigation. Clock received no hearing, even though he contradicted his accuser's claims. Had Snow reported to the Title IX coordinator, Clock would have received protections from the school. Clock was immediately prohibited from attending the class where the incident was alleged to have occurred, was not told the name of his accuser, of course none of us know who that is either, informed that he could not contact anyone in the class, and effectively denying him the ability to find a witness to corroborate his story. Clock was charged with violating Title IX solely on the accusation, and was charged with 2 violations: physical abuse or threat thereof, and a non-specific violation of the school's anti-harassment policy. He was informed that this disciplinary record could keep him out of grad school, which Clock had planned to pursue, and just days after all this had gone down, Clock took his own life. By the way, shout out to Ash Scow, who you might know is a lovely journalist that writes for The Watchdog, and she's the one who provided this story to us.
She's bae.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is just...
She's kick-ash.
Yeah, she's kick-ass. This... I don't... After you hear stories like this, why? Why can't you just do due process? It's the best thing that's available to us, and in most cases, it minimizes the damage that could potentially happen. Just go through the procedures. That's why they're there. It prevents this sort of thing.
That's exactly why due process is under attack.
Yeah.
Because it prevents people from using false accusations this way. And honestly, this is one of many reasons why I think if you file a false charge, if you go to authorities with a false complaint of this nature, or any false complaint where a finding against the person that you're complaining about can result in penalties, you should face a criminal charge. It's not just slander. It's not just rumors. You are threatening somebody with penalties, with criminal penalties. And I every time you talk about something like this with a feminist or an advocate for this Title IX shit and the Dear Colleague letter and the Campus Save Act and all that, they'll turn around and say, well, it's not that bad for the accused because he doesn't have to go to court. He doesn't have to deal with criminal allegations. But then they want it in place because these allegations are so serious that the accuser should have some kind of recourse just in case they can't get justice in the court system. And I keep hearing the word justice substituted for the word conviction. Mm-hmm. Conviction isn't justice. Acquittal isn't justice. The pursuit of justice is the pursuit of the truth of a situation as it can be proved. And then the decision to act on the information that has been gathered and assessed in the most rational and reasonable, fair and legal way. And this is not justice under any circumstances. If the complainant in this was telling 100% truth, this would not have been justice. If the guy hadn't killed himself and he had faced whatever he would have had to face, and he was actually guilty of criminal sexual harassment, just kicking him out of school wouldn't have been justice either. Kicking him out of school is a terrible thing if he didn't deserve it, but not facing a criminal allegation if you have done something that victimizes another person, when there is a process in place to deal with that type of victimization, isn't justice either. It leaves the individual free to go and do it again to somebody else, somewhere else. And even if you are a victim, you are not entitled to make that decision, because the crime isn't just about you. It is about the criminal as well. Mm-hmm. And the legal repercussions aren't in place just for the victims. They are in place for the other potential victims as well. So all around this is bad. And this situation, and once again, this is why I say a false accuser who puts a person in a position where they are at risk of facing repercussions as a criminal, whether it's in a system like this or in a legal system, that person should face a criminal charge for the same reason. If they get away with it, if nobody ever does anything about that false allegation, that person and the next false accuser and the next are free to just go and do that again and again, to victimize the people that they victimize. This has to change.
Absolutely. It seems like every time we do a story about Title IX, it's some terrible thing. Do we need to get rid of it, or just sort of maybe reevaluate it?
Actually, there's what Title IX was originally created for. That purpose is gone. It doesn't exist anymore. It used to be women didn't have to work, right? It wasn't normal for an upper class woman to feel that she needed a job. So women who could afford to go to school to become professionals in areas that are needed by society, like physicians and attorneys and stuff like that, they might get that degree and then not go to work. And schools, knowing that and having limited slots in their academic area for those areas of study, would limit how many women could take those courses. And in the 70s, they were still doing it. even though women who were lower class, because you could actually financially lower class, that is, you could actually get scholarships and go to college, and it wasn't just limited to women who didn't have to work. It was women who were ambitious, who wanted to go out and become doctors and go into the profession and actually work in it. That they were going into those, and they were getting limited, and they were not able to become doctors. And so Title IX was created to tell universities, you can't limit how many women take these courses anymore. You're outdated. Catch up. And they did. And that problem doesn't exist anymore. And there are other areas of law, really, that would cover it if especially state-funded universities started limiting by gender who could take what.
Yeah.
And so Title IX's original purpose died decades ago. And what happened was, because there was a Title IX, there was a department to handle Title IX complaints. And there was an administration in that department, and there were employees in that department that wanted to keep their jobs. The education department, that was a sub-department of, right? They started tweaking Title IX. And they're able to do it without any legislative oversight, because according to the way the law is structured, all they have to do is send the changes they want to make to the law to Congress. And if those those changes sit, if I remember right, for 45 days, it might be 60, but I think it was 45 days. Those changes sit and nobody addresses them, they're passed. Congress has to actively look at and say no to any regulations, any regulatory changes to Title IX, in order for them not to go into effect. Mm-hmm. So all of these changes that have been used to attack sports and to go after men on campus, all of this stuff, that's all happened because there's no oversight. And that led us to this point where, looking at what Title IX had become, and looking at the advocacy that various organizations like the National Organization for Women and other feminist organizations were engaging in, the lobbying that they were engaging in regarding campus sexual activity, using false data from research done using Mary Koss's sexist methodology, Congress passed the Campus Save Act. So it's not just Title IX anymore that's the problem. Now we have Title IX and the Campus Save Act. Mm-hmm. And they both need to go. They both need to just flat out get eliminated.
Yep. There you go. We definitely need to do something about that. So this is... we're going to keep talking about this until we start to see some discussion around it. And I think that there is... that is starting to happen. I mean, here's Ash writing about it on her website. So good on you, Ash. Thank you. I guess unless there's something else, we should move on to the final story. I guess
rest in peace,
Max. This one's yours. And by the way, I placed this one at the end because I thought it'd be a nice capstone on top of everything else that we've read about. Yes. Is it any wonder that this is happening? Is basically how I would put it. But go ahead.
Yeah, and it's certainly, well, it's definitely nowhere near as depressing as the last two stories that we talked about. So now I was given the task of summarizing an article about MGTOW, and this might be the first one that I've ever summarized or read that doesn't have either the word sexist or misogynist in it. So woohoo. While that's a gain, though, when it comes to tackling issues honestly, there's also a worrisome element to this article that regresses said gain. So apparently, the men going their own way phenomenon has found its way to Australia, and it is no longer exclusive to men 20 years of age and older. At least that's the way I used to perceive it. Apparently, gender relations have gotten so bad that teenagers are now embracing the MGTOW ethic. And in an article from news.com.au, Corinne Barraclaw interviews boys from schools in New South Wales. One young man describes MGTOW in the way we've commonly come to understand it. Quote, This isn't about a specific rule book, more a mindset, although there are purists in the movement who are the most extreme and avoid women entirely. There's a growing number of there's a growing number of men who've had enough of feminism and enough of being told they have to work for a greater good, which doesn't actually exist. A 15-year-old young man named Tom, his real name was omitted, describes it in a more worrisome way. Quote, "It's probably not true of all women, but I've got the feeling that women are dangerous. Maybe the men around me had just had bad experiences. Last year, my uncle lost everything because his wife of 40 years decided she didn't love him anymore. Just like that, she randomly got up and left. It got nasty and he lost everything. His house, cars, and loads of his money. There's no way I'm ever getting married." Author and psychologist Meredith Fuller comments on the issue, which she describes as incredibly sad. Quote, "Both sexes have different challenges. We've lost sight of that. We're stuck in a gender war and it's harming our children. It's become very narcissistic, selfish, and a sense of entitlement is running rife. We need to get a focus back on having respect for other human beings, for partnerships, loving bonds, and trust, rather than simply seeing what you can get out of a relationship." Now, this is probably the most balanced article I think I've ever read on MGTOW, where they're just trying to represent as accurately and as honestly the issues at hand as best they can. But still, it's sort of, for me at least, it's sort of a bit worrisome that there are kids that are this young that are becoming so afraid of women that they go that far to say that they're dangerous on the whole. Now, I don't know what everybody else's feelings here are in respect to MGTOW, so I'll just, I guess, hand it over to whoever wants to speak first as to how they view this as a good thing or a bad thing.
Well, I'll just quickly throw in there. I think one of the reasons why there's probably a little bit more sympathy in this article is that we are talking about boys going their own way, and I guess it's a little hard to shit on that because they're younger, and I think that there's another thing too. If this is starting to pick up steam, maybe because you have to start to worry that this might actually start to affect your culture if enough boys start adopting it. I mean, if it's I don't know how many MGTOW there are. I don't know if there's a way to know, but I think that people are starting to pay attention now, and maybe this is actually a concern that they have. I know that Peterson, for example, Jordan Peterson's not a fan of MGTOW. He expressed some strong words, but I think that there is definitely there's definitely an outcry that's coming from here about genuine concerns with women. Whether or not those are all justified, I think that matters actually less than it is to try to understand and maybe help them if they need it, or have a larger discussion about why this is happening. Because if boys start checking out enough, it's actually going to start to impact things like reproduction rates and that kind of thing. And I know that, for example, I think in Sweden, this is not because of MGTOW, but I think in Sweden they had to start an ad campaign to get people fucking your movement. Years now, where they're worried about their aging population, and there's a lack of reproduction to sort of replenish it. So I wonder if this isn't the reason why there is a bit more of an even hand. Because if this was men, just adult men, there probably wouldn't be an article about it. And if there was rather, it would probably be a shaming one, like, oh, these guys are just losers, or weasels, But it doesn't seem to be the case. So
it'd be like every other article on men going their own way that doesn't come out of the men's rights community.
Yeah,
they'd be, soggy knees, soggy knees, soggy knees. The thing is, there's a lot of different ways to think about this, and one of them that struck me is it takes a threat to the community that men won't serve the community in the way the community wants men to serve the community, for the community to care whether or not men experience love. That's horrible. I mean, there's a lot of other things to say about men going their own way. And I know there's a lot of controversy. I still consider it to be a reasonable response to an unreasonable situation.
Yeah.
And I mean, I wrote about this in I think 2012 and republished the article in A Voice for Men in 2013. And I pointed out, what do you expect when you treat someone as nothing but utilitarian, and you tell them that their whole value as a human being is wrapped up in their service to their community and their service to women, and that if they want to be seen as prestigious, they want to be seen as valuable in any way, they must do those things. And then you turn around and shame them for doing those things and say, how dare you expect any kudos for that? That's your job, just do it. Eventually, they're going to walk away. They're not going to want to continue that system. They're not going to want you. And I basically said, my opinion of your sniffing a response at men who don't want any part of you is simple. Quit your bitching, ladies. It's your own damn fault. You have no business complaining. And that's who's been complaining about men going their own way, up to the point where it's suddenly realized that it's also really men, even though like most paid caregivers for old people in a lot of Western areas are women. It's really men who run that too. And without men caring about that, without men producing children, you're gonna have nobody in your old age. And it pisses me off that it takes that for people to care about men's welfare. Well, we can't use them anymore.
Exactly.
We won't have that use.
It becomes a thing when the lack of male sacrifice starts to affect women or the people who are complaining. When they see that they're going to have to pick up the slack, or they're going to be penalized in some way because there are men who are just like, I'm done with this shit. Then they realize that they're losing out, and now it's a problem. It was never a problem until that happened.
Well, then the other aspect of this is, all right, so they've noticed it's a problem. What are they going to do about it? Mm-hmm. Because if they're just going to start doing what women have done the whole time, particularly feminists, the whole time that they've been paying attention to men going their own way, it's not going to work. You can't shame men into accepting being shamed for not wanting to be shamed. It doesn't work. You hit a point where that becomes a completely ineffective tactic. It's like I said about Gamergate, where people won't like you doesn't work on people if they're already in that condition to begin with, if they're already the unpopular crowd, if they're already the bottom of the social ladder. Telling them that you're going to put them on the bottom of the social ladder does no good. If they already
feel like they're not going to lose anything, then it's not going to work.
Telling them that you're going to take away the thing that they have already given up on isn't going to work. If you want to change the situation, if you want to convince men that they are part of society, you have to treat them like human beings who are part of society. When they do something that has value, you don't treat them like, well, you were expected to do that. You treat it like it has value. You bring back the ticker tape parades, the confetti, the whatever. When they come back from a war, you don't spit on them and call them baby killers. You treat them like the heroes that they are, even if the government was wrong for sending them, because they aren't the ones who made that decision. And at the same time, you don't treat them like they're disposable at the whim of a woman's changing emotional states. Like, whose idea was that? That's pretty stupid, considering that We all say a woman's prerogative is to change her mind, and the joke gets finished up in my crowd with every 30 seconds. Why would you put somebody at the whim of somebody who does that? Why would you put somebody's welfare at the whims of people who are notorious for being more emotional and, to a degree, being slave to those emotions?
Mm-hmm.
You certainly shouldn't make the law slave to those emotions. So, I mean, the reform that we have talked about in the men's movement isn't just, men going their own way might not be directly combating for that in the trenches of the internet and lobbying for it and so on. They may have just said, hey, fuck it, I'm walking away. I'm not dealing with this anymore. What good is it going to do? Okay, if you don't want men doing that, then listen to us, because we're telling you why they are doing it.
We're saying all this from a red pill perspective, and a lot of people are going to get the idea that men and teenagers are learning this from we're saying on the internet. It's because they're putting the cart before the horse. Even from a blue pill perspective, you can discover MGTOW without discovering the red pill first. Because as this kid says, last year his uncle lost everything and blah blah blah. Those are the stories of relationships that they see in their lives going on around them. That's what they think relationships are. And it's quite telling that he told the story of his uncle. Where's your dad, Sonny? Oh, you don't have one? That's interesting. They're mostly growing up, in this country in particular, they're mostly growing up without a dad in their life at all. So they don't even know what a relationship is. The average relationship to them is one that does not exist and never has existed. So they're not getting many, good-looking stories of what happens in relationships. So it's perfectly reasonable, even if you've never read a book in your life, to reach the conclusion that marriage is not good, and specifically for men.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna talk about my dad again. I do that a lot. My dad grew up in a family where he had some stellar examples of what a woman should be when she grows up. From being a little girl, being a teenager, being a spoiled kid or whatever, when she grows up and she's actually an adult woman with responsibilities, there's a certain way that you act and a certain way that you live if you want to live up to those responsibilities and be there for your family and actually be an adult. And because of that, it affected the type of woman he chose to marry. He didn't just, go out and date somebody. Oh, she's pretty, I think I'll marry her, or we like the same things, I think I'll marry her. He had standards that I think a lot of guys are never taught to have because nobody communicates that to them. And he just happens to be very observant. And I don't know if anybody ever sat him down and said, don't just trust anybody with your heart. Don't just partner up with anybody without making sure that you're dealing with a person who is trustworthy and who is stable and who is going to take responsibility like you do. And this is a situation for young men right now. And I think a lot of them are told what they have to be in order to earn a woman's esteem, in order to earn the chance at a relationship with a woman. But none of them get told that a woman should have to earn that same chance with them. And this is another thing that I've harped on, and it bugs the shit out of me to see so many young men not know how to judge a woman. And so many people taking the words judge a woman as a misogynistic statement. Go ahead and call me a misogynist. But the reality is, we will never get out of a situation where it's reasonable for men to go their own way, as long as women don't have to live up to a standard in order to be with men. And I guess that's my thing. I talk about my dad a little bit in that, he figured that out for himself. And at where I come from as a person, is based on that. I wouldn't have been the same person if he'd have married a bimbo. You know, I wouldn't have been the same person if he'd have married a gynocentrist or a feminist.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have been the same person if he'd have married a ditz. You know, I'm the person that I am because he married an adult.
Yep. Well, thank you for that. That story gives us a glimmer of hope in today's extra dark episode of the Polecat Cast. Are there any other final thoughts before we close the show out and get ready to move on to the after show, which is about how, despite all of this shit that's happened this week, Mike Pence choosing not to go to dinner with a woman who is not his wife is somehow perpetuating rape culture.
Husbands going
Here's a final thought. Oh, here's a final thought. Because I know we got a lot of gamers that listen, and you know, some of them are parents and some of them aren't parents yet, but they will be. My advice: play video games with your kids, and shit talk. Get your kids shit talking to each other, and don't go easy on the girls. Just treat them like little boys in terms of gaming. Get them to accept being treated like the boys, and get them to play at large, you know, with other kids. Get them to the point where they can deal with the knockdown, drag out, shit talk, and all of the other things that go with playing games. No, you don't give up just because this was hard. Try it again. You know, things like that. Get your kids involved in something like that. So if you're not a gamer, get your kids involved in a sport. Get your daughters involved in a sport. Teach them to toughen up. You have that power. And you're the ones that are going to affect the next generation's capability to recover from the problems this generation has. And I'm not just saying it's on you guys. I'm saying you guys can fix it. We can fix it.
Yep.
You know, we may not be identical. I'm not saying that girls can do everything boys can do and boys can do everything girls can do. But in terms of dealing with reality and accountability and basically taking responsibility for your own welfare, handling hardship and stuff like that, emotional hardship, we can.
Mm-hmm.
So toughen up your daughters, just like you would your sons.
All right. Well, with that, I think we're done. So I want to thank you guys. And look, only just a little after the hour-and-a-half mark, considering the number of stories I had. Thank you, Hannah and Mike and Max and Scott, despite the fact that he never came here. I hope he's okay. We'll probably see him next week. And I want to thank Ash Scow for writing that one article, and El Kemlo, as well as Arweg and Mike J for helping with the summaries. And I want to thank you guys most of all, our audience, without which this wouldn't even be possible. So I'm going to leave it here. Now, this show will no longer show up in the YouTubes. It is now unlisted. And if you want to access it, you have to go to minds.com. That's minds.com/honeybadgerradio, all one word. Look us up, follow us there. We're going to be putting up all of our content linked through Minds. So now we're going to move on to the after show, and we hope to see the patrons that have paid to either join us or have paid to watch it in the after show. And we'll see you guys there. Thanks again. Have a good night, and thanks for joining us on